Oh my. What could have brought you here?
Hey everybody, I am Ben Moore, and I've been playing a lot of Fire Emblem 3 Houses. I've been working on a review, but before that review hits, we thought we'd sit down, have a conversation about the game. I am joined by Michael Damiani in the middle there, and at the end, Mr. Kyle Bossman.
Hello.
These guys like Fire Emblem. I like Fire Emblem, and I thought I would get this conversation rolling by talking about kind of the biggest things in 3 Houses that immediately jump to mind. And we can get into the details as we go along, and I'll be informed by your questions, and we'll have a nice little back and forth. But the biggest thing, and kind of the way the whole game is structured, is in this school life style, where in the game, you're at this monastery, you're a professor at this monastery, and you have an entire month, and at the end of the month, you'll have a mission that you need to do. And you'll kind of go along the days, and then there will be points where you can stop and do a different thing. So on one day, it's like, hey, do you want to explore the monastery, spend time with the students, maybe have a meal with them? And by doing activities in the monastery, you can increase the motivation of your students. And think of motivation like a currency. So then when you get to a day where it's an instruction day, you can spend that motivation and you can use it to kind of build up their skills. So let's say you have one classmate and you want to build them up in lances. You can use the motivation that you built up when you were exploring the monastery to kind of build up that skill. And 3 Houses is extremely flexible with how you can build each individual student from the house that you align yourself with. So you can pretty much make anybody do anything that you want them to. And so you can have an extremely customizable army, and that's very, very nice. The other major thing is you have to pick one of 3 houses. That's a big deal. And so you have the Black Eagles, the Blue Lions, and the Golden Deer.
How far in?
Not very far in. The way that it kind of goes is you have a prologue that kind of sets up the story and gets you familiar with the combat. And then you have some like, all right, we're going to let you get to know all of the students and spend some time with them before making that decision.
Sure.
And then once you make that decision, kind of just going off of that, you have a set of students from that house. And you don't have the students from the other houses, but you can put in the effort to recruit them if you want to. And the way that you do that is different students will respond to different skills. So it's like, well, you want me to flip-flop, you got to be better at reason. You got to be better at archery or something like that. And it's actually quite a lot to do that. I actually haven't recruited that way. I haven't recruited students from other houses to be on my side because it takes a lot of effort for you to do that. The other thing is when you're instructing students, even if all of them have full motivation, you only have a certain number of instruction points. And so you can't necessarily train all of them on any given day. And so you have to choose, who am I focusing on? What are we accomplishing today? And the more people that you get in, you know, the more resources there are to go around. So that's the decision that you have to make. And kind of the third thing that I want to mention before we get into any questions is that there is no weapon triangle in Fire Emblem 3 Houses. That's not to say that there aren't things that you have to consider. So just naturally, bows are still really effective against flying units. And so that's just true no matter what. But you also have things called combat arts. And your weapons have durability. And what you can do is you can use a combat art to do more damage or get more range. And then there are certain combat arts that are good against specific types of units. And so that is where like you using a certain type of weapon will come into play as well. But those are kind of the biggest things. We can get into like what it's like exploring the monastery.
That's where I want to start.
Yeah.
I don't know what that means to explore the monastery.
Yeah, like,
is it like walking around Hogwarts?
Yeah, kind of. You are in this big open area, and it's split up into a bunch of different sections. So you have a dining hall, you have a marketplace, you have a library, you have a cathedral, and you can go to all of these places. And from month to month, the people of the monastery will be in different places, and you can get into conversations with them.
Are there secrets?
There are secrets in the sense that you'll go around and you'll see this glowing blue thing, and you can go and you can get it, and that might be bait for you to go fishing, or that might be what is called a lost item. And so that's something else you can do, totally optional. But a lost item, it'll be like, hey, a person who really likes training is probably looking for this. And so then you got to think to yourself, okay, out of all these people, who likes training? And then you have to go and you have to give them their lost item.
Cute. Yeah.
And if you're successful, that will increase their affection towards you. That'll bump up their support towards you.
Are there any random conversations? Like, are there NPCs that you can walk up to and talk to that aren't your students necessarily, like other students?
Yeah.
Or like, do like little text bubbles come up? You just walk by, like, that seems like an interesting conversation. I'm gonna go walk over there and say hi.
Yeah, it's not like super dynamic in the sense that you'll be walking along and you'll like overhear this salacious rumor that you'll want to go and check out. But if you look on the map, there'll be this speech bubble next to anybody that wants to talk to you. So that might be people of your own house. That might be people of a different house. That might be other professors. And so you can go to all of them and they'll have something to say to you. If they have a speech bubble by their name, that means they have something new to say to you.
Okay.
And so you can get bits of information about the monastery, bits of information about other people, bits of information about the world, just by going and talking to people.
I have to know, as a professor,
Yeah.
can you actually fail a student? Can you like dismiss a student?
You can't dismiss a student.
Okay.
That's
but
my fantasy.
You can ignore them.
Okay. That's
entirely.
something. Yeah.
So
The problem will take care of themselves. Just walk away.
I can't really get into the specifics.
Sure.
Yeah.
But later on, I got somebody who was a mage, and that was like the one thing I didn't need was more mages.
Yeah, been there,
Super
yeah.
good on mages.
Yeah.
And so I just like didn't have them fight. I didn't like, even if I would have extra like resources to spend when instructing, and I could have instructed, I just didn't. And it wasn't because like I hated them as a character. I just didn't need them around. And so you can completely ignore them if you want to.
And in battle, are they like generals of their own like little small groups of armies? I'm confused about like when you see the animation and how it's like two teams clashing against each other.
So that's another big new feature of combat that absolutely bears mentioning is when you attack and you have the combat animation, there will be kind of these troops surrounding you, and you'll notice that depending on the unit, it'll be different types of troops. That's a feature called Battalions, and after a certain point in the game, you can assign every individual unit a battalion. And what that is it's groups of soldiers that you can send to do a special attack that will have a different effect. So you can do one battalion and you can like lock them down, and so they can't move. So that could be really useful.
Not sure if you're allowed to answer this, but I'm very curious. And so in previous Fire Emblem games in combat, there would be secondary objectives and also like secret objectives.
Yeah.
And I've wondered if you come across any of that through the parts you're allowed to talk about.
Yeah. The objectives so far, I would say, have been pretty typical.
Okay.
There hasn't been anything that's felt different from what you would expect out of Fire Emblem. It's a lot of defeat the commanders. It's a lot of rout the enemy. Sometimes it's rescue these people. The ways that they kind of mix it up is the different types of maps. So you might be in like a volcanic area and certain spots will damage you. You might be in a sandy area where it's harder to move around. And there are moments where doing especially well will get you a bonus in the battle. And so there's a mock battle pretty early on between whatever house you picked and the other houses. And it's like, hey, if you kill more units than any other house, you'll get a bonus for this.
How do weapons work?
Weapons, what do you mean specifically?
So I assume it's not just like one sword for one person that degrades and then you need to replace it.
So the way that you can do it is every character has a limited inventory space. And so let's say my character is using a sword and that, let's just say, for example, that is 20 durability. I can give that person 4 swords with 20 durability if I want. So that way in battle, once one breaks, I just have another one available. Or you can equip different types of weapons depending on the situation.
So weapons are all the same, though. There's still like I have a number next to it, and
you have a
once
number
that's
next
gone,
to it.
the weapon's gone.
it's just the combat arts can accelerate that degradation because it's like for getting the effect of the combat art, that attack might cost 5 durability instead of like a normal attack, which will cost 1 durability.
Sure.
Yeah.
Can you repair them pretty easily?
You can. It takes the way that you repair them is from the blacksmith, and it takes a little bit of time to get the blacksmith. But with the blacksmith, you can repair the weapons. That costs a material that you need to have. You need to either buy or find or whatever, and then you can repair weapons. And you can also forge weapons. So, if you have 2 swords, you have 2 steel swords, you can fuse them together and make a steel sword plus, which will be a little bit more effective.
I'm kind of curious about how the dissolution of the weapon triangle, essentially.
Yeah.
Because thinking back to older Fire Emblems, just how you approach certain units mattered so much based on, like, that's an axe user. Well, you got a sword, go in with that. Or if you have a lance, like, I know you talked a lot about different combat arts. Is it really just if you have the right combat arts or right skill, you can like overcome any adversary at you? Like if equal levels, assuming. I'm not saying like coming over leveled.
Yeah.
Does like any weapon advantage? You mentioned archers having advantage against flying units. I'm talking like is any semblance of the old system even there anymore? Is it's just obliterated? It's just gone.
No, it definitely is in some sense. So I mentioned like the archers and the flying units, but you'll still fight a lot of like heavily armored units.
Okay.
And like it's rather than getting into like a melee scuffle with them, it's better to have a magic user because they'll just completely obliterate the heavily armored units. Or there might be an objective that you need to get to, and so it's like, all right, well, I'll have to go through this maze to get there with my infantry units. But if I have a flying unit, it's like, shoop, I gotta go all the way there. But it's like to do all of these different things, I have to train my students. So if I want this person to be a flying unit, I've got to put in the effort. I've got to go through the systems and make sure that they're learning the right stuff so they can do that, so I can have that advantage on the battlefield.
And Kyle asked a little bit about the weapons, but I want to follow up on that.
Yeah.
Are there any like attributes to weapons in terms of like you mentioned like a heavy unit?
Yeah.
Is there like an axe or a sword that has like piercing or something like that is more effective? Like there are weapons that are more effective because of their attributes.
Yes. There are weapons. There are special weapons that you get that will have additional effects to them.
Okay.
And then there are combat arts that will be, if you use that combat art, it'll be extra effective against that type of unit.
Have you chuckled yet?
I have not chuckled.
Okay.
There have been several. I really like the characters in this game.
Nice.
And that was something that I was really happy to walk away from and think that they were really well developed. Because the way that it starts, as you're building up support and you're having these conversations between you, the professor, and just the different conversations that the students themselves can get into, it starts a lot of times in a very cold place where they like don't really like each other, don't really understand each other, but it builds up very, very slowly and very effectively where everybody from my house, I feel like the Black Eagles, anything that is like annoying about them or any quirks that they have, it feels like it's coming from a very grounded place where you can take all their attributes and it doesn't feel like, oh, they wrote that in to appeal to like that kind of person. It doesn't feel superficial. Like everybody really has a pretty strong conviction for doing what they're doing. And I think that's something about Three Houses that so far it's one of my favorite things is this feels like a very, very grounded game. I think there was a lot of worry that with it being a school setting, that it would be more superficial or kind of more fan servicey or whatever, that it would focus on like gossip or relationships or things like that. And that's really not at all what it's like being in this monastery. It is very much like these people are at war. They're at school so they can learn how to fight in this war. And it's a very scary thing that they're going to do. And in order to get through this education and to get through these battles, they have to be really, really focused. They have to understand who they are, why they're doing this. And there's a lot of world building around it. The game goes to great pains to explain, like, this is what this region is. This is what this house is. This is their position in the world. And that's something I really like about it quite a bit.
my favorite thing to do in any Fire Emblem game is to Digivolve to upgrade my units.
Yeah.
Have you done it in the portion of the game that we're allowed to talk about?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, so what's that path like? What is the path to Digivolution?
Yeah, so the way that it works is if you want to Digivolve a unit, you're training up their individual skills. So let's say you want to make this person a cavalry unit, you'll need to increase their riding and lance skills. And then you'll need a seal to do so. So you have like intermediate seals, you have advanced seals, which is above that, and then you have master seals. And so you need to spend a seal, and the individual student needs to have those skills kind of within knocking distance. If you meet the requirements, let's like say you need to be at a C in lance and a C in riding, there's a 100% chance that when that student takes that exam, they take an exam is what it's called, it's a certification, that they'll pass and they'll be that new class, they'll Digivolve. If you get within knocking distance, it may not be a 100%. So let's say it's like you need to be at C and you're at D, but your other skill is there. You're close enough where the game is like, all right, if you do this, there's like a 50% chance that you'll succeed.
So you said they have grades for it, basically. Is that all done outside of battle with like me walking and talking to them, or do their grades improve in mid-battle as well as like they level up?
So there's different ways that you can do it. In battle, as you're using things, or so like let's say you're a sword fighter, like as you use a sword in combat, that skill will naturally improve. Kind of the biggest way you can get a huge chunk at once is by having those instructions and being like, I'm spending all of your motivation to pump up, let's say swords. That is where you'll see the biggest increase, but it also happens in battle. There are also activities you can do. So like in the cathedral, you can pick 2 students and sing with them. That'll raise their faith a little bit. So that's one way that you can do it. There's also...
No, tell me how that conversation goes.
Well, it depends on the student. Because you'll know, like, some of them want to sing and other ones don't. So Dorothea she's an operatic singer, and she's like, oh, I want to sing loud enough to be heard, but like not too loudly.
Is she like dancer class then? She like buffs?
No, she isn't.
That's just her thing. That's just her character trait.
That's just her character.
Got it.
She's an operatic singer.
Sure.
But you don't have to have her be a spellcaster if you don't want to. You can make her be whatever you want. But it's just that is her background. That's her storyline. And she's really enthusiastic about it. Other people, not so much. So it just depends on what day it is, like who wants to do it and all that sort of thing. So that's another way you can do it. There's also seminars that you can do. So you get these free days, and you can choose to either explore the monastery, or you can have these seminars, and different people will be like, okay, we're going to teach on these 2 things, and these are the students that will teach. And so you have to look at the seminar, and you have to be like, okay, this guy is teaching, archery and swords, and these are the people that are going to be there. I want to spend time going there because then I'll learn. They'll get those skills increased.
But you have to give up exploring the castle for a day.
Well, that's not the only thing that you have to give up. So there's 4 different options that you can spend on a free day. So this
is like Persona now.
Yeah, I see why people are saying that, and mechanically that makes sense, but it's just like, in terms of attitude, it doesn't really feel that way. And we can get more into that.
Too. Yeah.
Yeah. You can explore the monastery, and you can build up motivation, and you can get different benefits. You have the most freedom in Explore. You can do a seminar where it's like, okay, I'm going to spend this time to get these skills increased for these characters specifically. It's very focused. Then you also have battle. And there are side quests that you'll get where it's like, hey, in order to complete the side quest, you have to do this mission. And then there are paralogs, which are story-driven side quests, where it's like, do this side quest, and it'll tell its own kind of self-contained story, and it will focus on these characters specifically. Or if you want to... So the 2 things that I mentioned right there, like finishing off side quests or doing paralogs, those take also units of time. So if you decide to spend a free day doing battle, it's like, okay, at the beginning, you can only do one of these battles, like a side quest or a paralog, or there's always just battles that you can grind. You can do them as much as you want. So if you're like, oh man, I'm kind of worried about the next mission, I'm going to grind for a while, that option is available to you if you want it.
That's weird.
But the units that you're fighting in those missions will be lower level than your other options, where it costs time. And so kind of the trade-off is it's like I can grind out these lower level guys, or I can do these higher level guys once. And then every so often you'll run into like a rare enemy battle and everybody will be way higher than they would in the other available options. You can also rest, which I've never really needed to do. And what that does is that resting will build up everybody's motivation. So it's like, okay, I want, like everybody's spent from this instruction.
Yeah.
I want to rest, get some motivation back so I can teach them again.
I'd rather motivate by walking around the courtyard, though. You know what I mean?
Right. But you have to keep in mind that when you're walking around the courtyard, motivating them will cost something. It'll be like, okay, I can only eat with 2 people.
Yeah.
Who do I want it to be? And then I can't keep eating. Like I can do that once in this day. Or I have to give them gifts. You have a finite number of gifts that you can give that will also increase their motivation. So you're giving something up, whereas rest is like...
everybody.
Right, but you're not doing the other activities. And so you have a ton of decisions to make.
Did you lose anyone in the portion of the game that you played?
Yes. So there were a couple of times where I just made a dumb decision or didn't see like, oh, that's what will happen if these 2 units come in contact. And I did lose somebody. But like Fire Emblem Echoes, you have a rewind time function.
Oh.
There's also the casual mode if you want to do that where people will come back. But if you're playing on Classic, they can die, but you have a rewind time feature. And that is something that you can do so many times per battle, and you can just rewind to a specific point. So it's like, oh, I shouldn't have made that move. It doesn't even have to be death. It can just be like, oh, I don't want to put that unit there. I'd rather put them over here. You can rewind time a limited amount, and kind of fix that issue. And then there are things that you can do later on in the game that increase that, so you can rewind time even more.
I appreciate it. I used it during Valentia. Like also Fire Emblem will just be like, and then these units showed up right there behind you. It's like, come on.
That definitely happens.
Yeah, and so that's a nice thing to have.
Another thing that I think is important to bring up with combat is you'll fight these demonic beasts, and these are like multi-tile creatures. They'll take up like 4 spaces on the map. And they have multiple health bars, and they have these shields around them. And they can do a ton of damage just individually, within melee range, at a distance. And they'll also have these area of effect attacks where they can just hit a bunch of people at once. But the trade-off here is if you manage to break their shields, you can stun them. And if you break all of their shields, they won't be able to move. And so what the game wants you to do is they want you to get in, use a battalion, so you're not directly putting yourself at risk, not taking damage. Use a battalion, break their shield, stun them, follow up, and then just slowly whittle down their multiple chunks of health. But yeah, do you guys have any other questions about the story or the characters or how anything plays out?
I have to know, are the seminars ever well attended?
Well, the way that a seminar works is when you sign up for it, it's like, this is what will be trained, and these are the students that will be trained. So you know exactly who's going to be there.
Okay.
So it's not like,
but is it,
this person missed class, go.
But do you sit and watch and learn something?
No. It's not like that.
Okay.
Like
just
it's
fast
like,
forward.
Yeah. It's just like, and that's kind of the thing that I wanted to mention is I've seen a lot of people compare this to Persona, for instance, for how the school day plays out. And like, I get that, and I think that comparison is warranted in some aspects, but in other ways it's not. Whereas like in Persona, yes, you're building social links you do get benefits in combat, very powerful benefits in combat, but it's also like, who do I like? Who do I want to have like this awesome one-on-one with? Whereas I feel like a lot of my decisions in Fire Emblem, it's like, I'm doing it as a means to an end, where it's like, I want to get you an A in magic. I'm going to make tactical decisions to try to get you there. It's a lot of the decisions aren't necessarily, having me understand you better as a character. And you can play that way if you can just favor whoever you want for any reason. But I've just found in terms of effectiveness, it's been primarily driven by stats. And then as a consequence of that, you get support conversations that you can view, and that's where you get to know them better. But that's just kind of a result of you doing other things. Whereas like in Persona, I would feel like my biggest reason for talking with you is I want to push that story ahead. Whereas a lot of decisions, it's like, nope, get those stats.
Higher stats, yep.
We should talk about the technical side of Fire Emblem Three Houses because it's a little wonky. Frame rate's not great in the Monastery in particular. You'll be walking around. It's just like, there it is. Like you'll just get some chunk as you're walking around. It's definitely it's something you get used to, and it's definitely not ruinous to the experience, but it's there and it's noticeable. The other thing that is weird, and I don't know why this happens, but a lot of times you'll be in situations, whether it's for the story, whether it's for a support conversation, whatever it is, it'll be two character models talking to each other. And there will be this background, this not 3D background, but they'll kind of like warp it to have it make sense with these 3D characters. But there will be times, there's particularly one, I think it's like in the dining hall, where the image that they're using for the background just doesn't look right. And there's just like a crease, and it's just like the image is bent. And so there will be a bench in the background, and it's supposed to be straight, but the way that they've like stuck this image on in this like room that you're in, it's bent. And so the bench will just be like bent like that, and it doesn't look right. And it just looks really cheap and weird. And so just on a visual level, there's some roughness that will very much stick out at you. It's noticeable.
Still excited.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I guess talking about all of these different things, all of these different mechanics with the battle system and the school and all this stuff, I think there's maybe some understandable worry, because I think this is going to be the first Fire Emblem for a lot of people, that it comes at you way too fast, and it super does not. Okay. They do a pretty good job of maybe not the minor things. I think there's some minor things that they could do a better job of explaining for new players. But in terms of the major things, in terms of like how your day will go and how to spend your time, it's pretty broken down, and you'll get access to more facilities in a way that makes sense over time. And so that's really good. Yeah, that's Fire Emblem Three Houses. I've had a good time playing it. I think I've spent somewhere around the ballpark of 40 hours with it so far. Dang. And that's just, first playthrough on normal. So, yeah. Thank you so much, Kyle and Damiani, for having a chat with me.
It really is Fodlan in a nutshell. The good and the bad.
Like it or not, we'll be there soon enough. There it is. Garrick Mock Monastery.